That is something really important to us at Thomasville Church, is partnering with people in our community so that we can do our very best at doing our part as a church and being the hands and feet of Jesus. And so today we're excited because it's Father's Day, like I said before, and I hope that the dad joke wasn't too bad. Hopefully it didn't scar you guys, and I promise I won't do that again for a while. But we're in week 3 of our series called Summer Book Club, and we've been going through a new book of the Bible every single week, and today I'm excited about today's message. I really think that it's going to be a perfect opportunity for someone that may not fully understand the full story to understand how great God is and how amazing the story of Jesus truly is. And before we get into that, I just want to start off with a quick story. A few years ago in 2021, I was a part of a small team going over to Zambia, Africa, and to do a missions trip. And if you guys have ever traveled outside of the country, or if you've ever traveled to Africa, getting to Africa is half the battle, and especially getting out to where we were going. The missionaries that were from my last church, they were actually way out in the African bush. They had like a 2-day drive from any major city just to get to their local village, and they had a church way out in the middle of nowhere where they were sharing the good news of Jesus. And so it was our job for us to go out there and to help support them. They needed help with their roof. They needed help with many other things. Their storehouse was leaking, and so all of their provisions were getting ruined. And so we decided to take a team to go out there and not only help fix all of their problems, but also go evangelize and go talk to the people of their village. Now, you can understand that this is a pretty awesome opportunity for all of us, and mission work is truly incredible. Now, we have a long flight over, 15 and a half hours, and we take another couple flights, and next thing you know, we're on our way, and we have to get from the city of Lusaka out to a small airport. Now, let me tell you something. We got into a really small plane, and I'm not talking like, smaller one, or it's the one from Delta that's not quite the 737. I'm talking like 8 seats. You can see all the rivets, you can see all of the bolts, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, this is going to be pretty interesting. No Wi-Fi, no snacks, no nothing, right? This is just bare bones. And you get in, and the engine turns on, and the whole thing is shaking, and you're thinking, I really hope we get where we're going. And sure enough, we get up in the air, and I'm not a nervous flyer. I really am not. I don't mind flying at all. I have no problem with it. I had just gotten done flying for multiple days straight. But let me tell you something. When you're in a small plane, and we know we have some pilots in here, whenever you feel like you're falling out of the sky and the plane is hitting turbulence, and next thing you know, it feels like you're literally like falling, you start really praying quick. You start going, Lord, I think this may be it. And this wasn't just like the seatbelt sign turned on turbulence. We were getting beat up. We thought this was the absolute end. And let me tell you, everyone in the plane had the same conclusion that I did, was that this was it. This was going to be the end of the story. We're going to crash out in the middle of nowhere, and no one's going to be able to find our bodies for days. And we accepted it. We understood it. I remember one of the guys turned around and he just said, can I just pray really quick? Because I think we're going down. And obviously, I made it safely there. But let me tell you what, in that moment, I truly thought it was the end. I truly thought there was nothing else that I could do in that moment, and I believed that I was going to die, that was going to be the end. Next thing you know, we're everyone's buckled in, and everyone's just saying, hold on, it'll be fine. And we hit really hard. It felt like we crash landed. I thought we blew the tires up, but we landed, and next thing you know, the pilot comes over the speaker and says, welcome to where your destination. Have a great flight. And you're thinking, that's it? I went through all of that for nothing? I mean, it obviously wasn't for nothing because I didn't die, but I remember thinking, I thought for sure I was going to die. Everything that I had believed was pointing to the direction that was over. I was not going to get home. I was not going to get to see my wife ever again. I was not getting to see my family. I had my own doubts that we were going to land that plane. And my doubt about surviving that flight felt so real. And it was completely justified because all of the information was pointing to where there was no end in sight. But I was completely wrong. Not because the danger wasn't real in that moment, but because I couldn't see the full picture from where I was sitting. And that's exactly why so many of us are with doubt in our lives. We're making conclusions based on what we can see and missing what God is doing just outside of our line of sight. And so we've been in our summer book club series all summer. In week 1, we were in Exodus, and we discovered that deliverance in the desert comes through dependence on God. And then last week we talked about the book of Proverbs. We learned that wisdom isn't about staying barely inside of the lines, is that wisdom is choosing the right path. And this week we're going to be landing in the Gospel of John. And if Exodus, right, shows us how God rescues his people, and Proverbs shows us how God's people should live, John answers the most important question of all. Right? He tells us who Jesus is. And it is the most important. And he just didn't tell us what he did. He just didn't tell us what Jesus taught or just the stories. He taught us who he truly was. And that's what we're going to get into today, because that's the question that John is writing to answer, is to teach us exactly who Jesus was. Because we all know, we've read most of the Gospels. We understand the story of Jesus. And I want to make sure that it's very clear that as we're going through these next few verses, that we really get to lean in on not just what Jesus did, but who he truly is. Now, John is one of 4 accounts of Jesus' life in the New Testament. We know Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John. And if we've read all 4, you understand they're not all exactly the same. They're slightly different, and they have variations. Matthew, Mark, and Luke read more like historical accounts. They are chronological in their order, and they teach us about what happened in the right timelines. They record events in sequence. But John does something very different. And if you've read it, you understand it. Every story, every miracle, every conversation he chooses to include, it's all selected on purpose. It's all selected to help answer the question of who Jesus truly is. And here's the thing I love about John, is he actually tells us straight up why he wrote it. In John 20, verse 31, it says this, "But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name." So this one sentence completely sums up the entire book of John. He tells us exactly why he's writing it, so that you may know him, may make a decision and to follow Jesus. Belief is the heartbeat of the gospel. He's telling you have to believe in him. And you see, this changes how we read the Gospel of John and every story in it. Every miracle isn't just a cool moment we get to maybe get some evidence, but every conversation isn't just interesting. It's a piece of the puzzle that we get to learn about who Jesus truly is. John makes his case through many different signs. He talks about 7 miraculous signs that reveal who Jesus is. Water turned to wine at the wedding. A government official's son was healed from a distance. A paralyzed man became walking after 38 years. 5,000 people fed from one young boy's lunch. Jesus walking on water, and a man born blind is able to see for the first time in his life. And ultimately, a man named Lazarus walking out of the tomb after 4 days in the ground. Those are 7 miracles that we see in this account. That's further proving the point that John wants us to make of who Jesus truly is. 7 signs, each one more impossible than the last. Each one pointing to the same conclusion. This is not an ordinary man. This person was special. John also writes, records 7 I am statements that Jesus made. And if you understand the Jewish context, and it's what I want to share with you this morning, this is absolutely stunning. Because I am is the name God gave himself when Moses asked who was sending him to Pharaoh. So you can understand that all the people who have studied Jewish law, they understand what this statement is. It's the most sacred name in all of Judaism. And Jesus takes that name and applies it to himself 7 times. He says, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. And one of the most famous ones, he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Every time Jesus said, I am, the religious leaders in the room understood exactly who he was claiming to be. And here's the thing, they still wanted to stone him for it. They wanted to send him to death. Because here's the thing, if you're claiming these I am statements, these are pretty powerful things to say. Because there's no middle ground. Either you are exactly who you say you are. You are the Son of God. You are Jesus. You're the Messiah. Or you're just someone claiming to be. And let me tell you, if you're just someone claiming to be that, that's blasphemy. And that is worthy of stoning. And so you can't just read them and walk away thinking, man, Jesus was just a really good and moral teacher who said some nice things. He's either exactly who he said he was, or he was something else completely. But that's the tension that John is building throughout this entire story. 7 signs, 7 I am statements, story after story, all of it moving toward one moment. And it's one moment that's often forgotten in the book of John, and I think it's one of the most powerful moments in all of the Gospels. To one declaration that's made. All this comes from the most unlikely person in the room. A man who refused to believe. A man that we've nicknamed Doubting Thomas. And I think John put this story at the very end of the gospel on purpose. And we're going to uncover that today. Because I think Thomas isn't just the cautionary tale in the story. Thomas is actually the point. So let's look at what actually happened to Thomas over the next couple verses, because I think once you really see it and you fully understand it, but it's going to change the way that you think about your own doubt in your own life, and maybe the doubt that you see from the people that you love. And so to understand Thomas, you have to understand what he just lived through. He was living through the 3 years with Jesus where things were perfect, right? He followed Jesus for 3 years and he left everything. He left everything behind. Left his job, his income, his plans, watched miracles up close, got to break bread with Jesus. He was able to hear the teachings firsthand, believed with everything that he had that Jesus was the one that the Jewish people had been waiting for their entire history. And he watched Jesus get arrested. He watched Jesus get beaten. And he watched Jesus get crucified. He watched him die, and he watched him seal the tomb. And whatever hope Thomas had in his own life that he had been carrying for 3 years died on that cross with Jesus. The dream was over. The movement was finished. The man Thomas had given everything to was gone. So when the other disciples come running to Thomas and they say, "Hey, we have seen the Lord," Thomas is not in a position to just take their word for it. He has doubt. He's not being stubborn. He's not being the problem. He's being honest that he doesn't believe. There's no way that you've just seen the man that I saw a week ago just get absolutely murdered. There's no way. And I think that's important for us to understand before we judge him too quickly. As we go to chapter 20, verse 24, it says this: "Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, 'We have seen the Lord.' But he said to them, 'Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hands on his side, I will not believe.'" Now, I want to make sure that we are covering something that's really easy to miss. Thomas didn't leave. Thomas didn't move on. He didn't just go back to his life. He didn't just leave the disciples. He stuck around. He said, "I'm not going back to my old life." But here's the thing. He just couldn't get himself to believe something that he hadn't seen yet. And there's a real difference between leaving and staying, because staying and doubting is very different from just leaving and never even giving it a chance. And honestly, I think that's one of the most human moments in the entire Bible. He stayed, but he didn't believe. He had all of the doubts. And he said, no, this is exactly what I want to see. I want to be able to feel the holes in his hands for me to even have a thought about believing that you saw the Messiah. Most of us have had a season where we couldn't make all the pieces fit. We couldn't make it make sense, and we struggled with understanding what God was trying to have us do or what he was trying to teach us, and we experienced all the doubt where we wanted to believe, but something in us just couldn't get there yet. Thomas didn't pretend. He didn't pretend to just go, "Okay, the disciples are right. It's all good. I guess I believe them." No, he was honest with himself. He didn't fake it. I think that's so important. He didn't sit in the back row and just nod and go, "Yeah, okay, I'll take their word for it." He wanted to know for himself. He said exactly what he needed, and I think there's something so courageous about him saying, "I need to feel the holes in his hands." Because I believe honest doubt is better than dishonest certainty. I'd rather honestly sit there and go, "I'm not sure if I know," than to sit there in a complete lie saying, yeah, it's all good. I'll take their word for it. And see, sometimes the church, that's how we like to treat doubt. We treat it like it's the worst thing that a person can bring through the doors on a Sunday morning. Like having real questions means that there's something wrong with you, when it's completely the opposite. Like faith means never wrestling, never fighting, never trying to fully understand where we need to be in our relationship with Jesus. Never saying, I'm not sure I can believe that right now. Those are the important things that we need to be saying. But that's not what this story teaches us. Thomas brought his real self to Jesus. And Jesus showed up for him, which brings us to what I think is actually the most important part of the whole story, because it would have been completely understandable for Jesus just to continue moving on with his plan, for him to move on without ever going to Thomas. Thomas had already said, he goes, I need to feel the holes in his hands. And Jesus could have very much just moved on and continued on with his next couple of steps. The disciples had already seen him. They already knew that he was alive. He could have just said, Thomas, believe your fellow friends. Believe the disciples. Thanks for moving forward, but watch what Jesus does next, because this is where it gets really good. A week goes by. Thomas is still with the disciples. He hasn't left yet. He's still there. He's still wrestling, and he's still waiting. And then Jesus appears again. Chapter 20, verse 26 and 27, it says, a week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out to your hand and place it on my side. Stop doubting and believe. See, what's so important about this story is Thomas told the disciples exactly what he needed, and Jesus met him in that moment. Jesus appeared to all of them and said, here, feel my hand, so that you can stop doubting and believe. Jesus came back specifically for Thomas. And I really want you to sit with that for a moment, because it's truly remarkable. He could have moved on. I mean, so many of us will never have the opportunity of actually holding his hand on this earth and going, oh, I believe that it happened. We're just told to just believe, right? We're told to have faith. But he went to Thomas, and he showed him his hands. He showed him his side and said, no, remove all doubt. He doesn't walk away and say, Thomas, I heard what you said last week. We need to have a conversation about your attitude. I heard what you were saying. He walks in and says, no. Believe. He doesn't shame them in front of the group. He doesn't make an example out of Thomas. He walks straight in and says, here, remove all of your doubt. Everything you needed is right here. Jesus knew exactly what Thomas needed. And he provided it without a lecture, without a guilt trip, without making Thomas feel like he had failed some sort of faith test. He showed up and met him exactly where he was. And see, that means something really important for you and for me, right? If you're sitting in this room today with real doubts, that's normal. Questions you haven't said out loud, things that you're not sure you believe right now, seasons where God has felt completely absent from your life. Jesus is not done with you. Because if he came back specifically for Thomas, it means he came back specifically for you. He came back specifically for you to have a relationship with him, because Jesus doesn't shame your doubt. He meets you in it. Right? I think about that plane ride over across Zambia. I was absolutely convinced that I was going down in a plane crash. I believed that there was nothing that was going to keep me from crashing. Everything I was experiencing was pointing me to that one direction. All of the information. But it just wasn't, I just couldn't see everything from where I was sitting. I didn't have the full picture. The plane was fine. The pilot knew exactly what was happening. I just couldn't see it from my seat. Thomas could only see what he had experienced. And what did he experience? He saw Jesus beaten. He saw him crucified on a cross. So therefore, Thomas can only believe what his eyes have told him. The tomb was sealed shut. And Thomas thought that that was the end. And here's where it lands, right? because we call him Doubting Thomas, but like that's the whole story of Thomas, right? And we're going to continue on. But doubt is not the headline of Thomas's life. What happens next is the headline, and I really don't want you to miss that part. So as soon as we see Jesus walking into the room with all of the disciples, and he walks up to Thomas and he places his hand on his, look what Thomas says next. In verse 28, it says this: Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." He said, "My Lord and my God." I want you to know that nobody else in the entire Gospel of John says those exact words, says that phrase. My Lord and my God. A declaration that is truly powerful. Peter didn't say it. Not the disciples who saw the empty tomb first. Not Mary Magdalene at the garden. The man we call the doubter declared one of the most powerful things in the entire book of John. He says, "My Lord and my God." See, his doubt didn't disqualify him. His doubt drove him deeper. Because Thomas couldn't settle for secondhand faith. He wanted to see with his own eyes. He wanted to see exactly what it was so that he could have the faith in Jesus. And when he finally encountered the risen Jesus, there was nothing halfway that came out of his mouth. He said, "My Lord and my God." He didn't say, "Oh, wow, I can't believe it really is you." He says, "You are my Lord, and you are my God." That's not a man who barely made it back from the battle of doubt. That's a man who has removed all doubt in his entire mind and heart. That's a man who arrived somewhere deeper than he had ever been before. And what led him there? What led him to this moment? The doubt. Because doubt honestly faced leads to faith more solid than you started with. He honestly said, "I don't believe. Jesus, you have to show me." And just a few verses later, we see him declaring one of the most powerful phrases that we have in the Gospel of John. And then Jesus says something remarkable after Thomas makes that statement. And he says something not just to Thomas, but to everyone that would come after him. Everyone who couldn't be in that room. Everyone who would have a hard time believing and seeing with their own eyes. And verse 29 says this: that Jesus told them, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed." Jesus is talking about you and me. He's talking about us who have not seen him with our eyes, but yet we still believe day in and day out and follow him with everything that we are. He's saying that there's blessing available to those people who believe without seeing my hands, without seeing my side. We're never going to get that dramatic moment that Thomas got. You may never have every question answered exactly how you want it answered. But Jesus, who came back specifically for Thomas, knew exactly what he needed and showed up for him anyway. And that same Jesus is present with you right now in this room when you're walking through whatever you're walking through today. What I want to talk about as we are closing this book today, I want to talk about what doubt actually looks like in real life. Because I think when most people hear the word doubt, they picture someone sitting in a philosophy class and they're arguing about whether God exists or not, and big abstract questions of all these different theological things and all this different doctrine. They're going, okay, let's debate, right? But for some people, it doesn't look like that. For some people, it doesn't look like that at all. Sometimes doubt can be really quiet. Sometimes doubt can be so minute that we don't even realize that's what it is. Maybe doubt looks like a person who prayed for a marriage to be restored and it wasn't. And now every time someone in church talks about God answering prayers, they sit there and think, he didn't answer mine. Maybe they've never told anybody that. They just keep showing up to church hoping that God's going to do something, but in their mind, they have just a little bit of doubt. And they're worried that maybe God will never answer what I need him to answer or what I hope for him to answer. Hoping that nobody notices the gap that they may have in their life. And they're singing songs on Sunday, but it's not truly what they actually believe. Doubt looks like the person who lost someone they loved and couldn't find God anywhere in that season. Who prayed and felt nothing. Who opened their Bible and felt nothing. Who came to church and sat through worship and felt completely alone. And they started to wonder, is any of this actually real? Or have I just been telling myself a story all these years? Doubt looks like a person who grew up in church and believed everything that they were taught. And then when life happened in a way that they didn't expect, now they're not sure if everything that they had grown up with is actually a part of it. I'll be honest with you. I've been in that place. The place that is full of doubt, wondering if the prayers that you are saying are even getting off the ground and even getting to God. And it's hard for sometimes as a pastor to say, because this is what we do for a living. We help people find and follow Jesus. And I'm going to be real with you. There's times where I struggle with knowing that God are you listening to what I'm asking you? Are you listening to my own prayers? The doubt is real. And see, here's the thing, is so many times I feel that I can't share the doubts that I'm having in my own life because that would be crazy for a pastor to say, but here's the thing, Thomas didn't care. Thomas walked with Jesus, and yet he said it out loud. And I think this story is so powerful, and Jesus, he didn't shame him for it. He showed up for him. And that changed everything. This story changed everything for me about how I view doubt in my own life. Because I'm human, I'm going to doubt. I'm going to have struggles. I'm going to think, God, are you even there? But more often than not, he always shows up in those moments later on and proves that he is there. See, your doubt does not disqualify you from following Jesus. Thomas doubted out loud in front of everyone, and Jesus showed up. He did not remove him from the team. He did not say, Thomas, you've been demoted. He says, no. I'm here for you. And he said, my Lord and my God. The most important thing Thomas did wasn't believing, it was staying. It was staying with the disciples. It was staying in that moment. He kept showing up when he couldn't believe. He stayed in the room. He stayed connected. Here's the thing. Because here's what I know about doubt. Doubt that is honestly faced and brought to Jesus has a way of leading to something deeper than where you started. The people with the most unshakable faith that I've ever met in their life are rarely the ones who have never doubted. They're the ones that have been sitting there going, I don't know if this is going to work, and I don't know if you're going to be there, but I'm never going to stop. I'm going to keep praying, and I'm going to stay in this moment, and I'm going to keep worshiping. I'm going to keep coming and being a part of groups, and I'm going to keep walking this walk. Today I don't really believe, but tomorrow I'm going to be trying my hardest to stay in this moment. See, here's the thing. Doubt isn't the opposite of faith. Despair is. Go to the next slide for me. There we go. Doubt isn't the opposite of faith. Despair is. Despair walks away. Doubt stays and fights because God has never been afraid to fight for us. So as we wrap up the book of John and we wrap up the story of Thomas, we know that he said his doubts out loud. Jesus did not shame him, and he was there for him. See, doubt isn't a sign that your faith is broken. It's often where faith actually begins. And I want you all to know that today. So wherever you are today, wherever your faith is strong or whether it's barely holding on, stay in the room. Stay in the fight. Stay with the people that you care about, the people who are walking this fight with you. Today could be hard, but tomorrow might be different. Thomas didn't believe, and yet he declared, my Lord and my God. Jesus is not afraid of your questions. He's not afraid of all the things that you may not fully believe today, but he guarantee he's going to meet you in the moment, and he's going to walk alongside you no matter what. So as we wrap up today, I want you to know, doubt is not the enemy. Doubt often leads to something better and something deeper than where you were before. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this moment. Thank you for today as we can open up your word and we can learn about how truly you love us and you care for us. And Lord, be with us as we doubt. Be with us as we struggle with the things that we're going through in life, and allow us to stay in the fight. Allow us to be like Thomas. Thomas stayed. Thomas was a part of it. He never left. He never abandoned. Lord, meet us in our moments. Meet us in our lowest points. Meet us in every part of our life so that we can believe you with everything that we are. Lord, if there's someone in this room today that does not have a relationship with Jesus, that they would just pray a prayer like this. It says, Lord, I know that I am a sinner. And I know that I cannot live this life without you. And I have so much doubt in my life, but one thing I want to believe in today is I want to believe that you sent your son down to this earth to die for me and to meet me just like he met Thomas. And I'm going to change my life and follow you with everything that I am. And Lord, I pray for anyone in this room that has prayed that prayer today, that they would have the courage to say, yes, I have made the decision to follow him. I have started to remove all the doubts in my life to follow Jesus with everything that I am today. Lord, we thank you for this church. We thank you for this church family. We thank you for all the dads. Be with us as we continue our week. And be with this food as we are about to have and the connections we are about to make. In your name we pray. Amen.